Should gay people go to Kuala Lumpur? That's the question I was asking myself just a short while ago, and it's the one we're going to explore on today's episode of Barrel Boy Travels. Kuala Lumpur is a fascinating city with some stunning architecture, great food, and fabulous people. But for LGBT travelers, there is a catch, a big catch. You see, Kuala Lumpur is located in the predominantly Muslim country of Malaysia, which has strict anti-sodomy laws. The punishments for violating these laws can be quite severe. So why did my husband and I risk possible prosecution just to take a vacation there? Well, you want to know the God's honest truth? We found a flight deal. As something of an av geek with admittedly expensive tastes, it has long been a dream of mine to fly business class on the longest flight in the world, Singapore Airlines Flight SQ21 from Newark to Singapore. If you have never had the opportunity to fly in a premium cabin on an Asian airline, you really owe it to yourself. This was a phenomenal experience.
Doesn't it feel like we just left?
It does kind of.
But I've gone off on a bit of a weird tangent. The one wrinkle with the itinerary that we found is that we'd have to continue on from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, where it's illegal to be gay. I did not know this when we booked the flight. Whoops. But a short while after booking the trip, I came across an intriguing news story.
I do not see the point of inviting the 1975 to a country and then telling us who we can have sex with.
There's this band called the 1975. I guess younger people know who they are, but I sure never heard of them. At any rate, they stirred up a lot of controversy at a music festival in Kuala Lumpur. The lead singer went on a tirade against the Malaysian government's anti-LGBT policies, and then, in a form of protest, made out with his bassist on stage. In response, the Malaysian government canceled the entire music festival, and they banned the 1975 from ever entering the country again. After hearing about this, it definitely got me wondering whether going to Malaysia was really such a good idea. Were we going to end up getting arrested or deported? Were we going to be able to stay in the same hotel room together? I really wasn't sure. So let's talk a little bit about the situation in Kuala Lumpur, and let's talk about these anti-gay laws. It all started with the British, who colonized the Malay Peninsula during the 18th and 19th centuries. In 1871, the Brits implemented an anti-buggery law. This made it illegal to have carnal intercourse against the order of nature with man, woman, or animal. This basically outlawed everything that wasn't missionary position between a man and his wife. The law prescribed draconian punishments such as public caning, which is still employed to this day. In September of 2018, 2 Malaysian women were convicted of attempting to engage in sexual acts with each other, and they were sentenced to 6 strokes of the cane. Then again, in 2019, 4 men were caught in a sting operation. This was conducted by Malaysia's so-called religious police. The undercover officers exchanged messages with the men on WhatsApp, and then they were charged with attempted sexual intercourse against the order of nature. The men were sentenced to a fine, 6 strokes of the cane, and 6 months of imprisonment. In practice, however, these extreme punishments are really quite rare, and the targets of this brutality are almost exclusively Malaysian Muslims living in rural areas. You see, Malaysia has 2 sets of laws. They have a secular civil law, which applies to everyone, and then they have Sharia law, which imposes additional restrictions on Malaysian Muslims. Muslims are not allowed to convert to a different religion, and they're prohibited from violating religious fasts or refusing to pray. They're also not allowed to drink alcohol. But conversely, non-Muslims are allowed to do all of these things, and as we'd find out, Kuala Lumpur is actually a real party town. It's not exactly what you think of when you think of a Muslim theocracy. Now, a small point of clarification, the anti-sodomy laws are a part of the secular civil code. That means that they apply to everyone. It is illegal to be gay in Malaysia, even if you're not a Muslim. In practice, however, these laws are almost never applied to tourists. In an interview in 2019, Malaysia's tourism minister raised some eyebrows when he said, quote, "I don't think we have anything like that in this country," meaning gay people. Yeah, I've been to Malaysia. There's lots of gay people about. But in the same interview, he did go on to clarify that Malaysia would never place any obstacles on tourists based upon their sexual orientation, religion, or cultural practices. An unnamed aide from the tourism ministry also quickly offered up some clarification on the minister's remarks, adding that, quote, "Tourists coming to Malaysia, like any other country, are welcome regardless of their creed, sexuality, religion, or color." And indeed, it is extremely rare that you will face any kind of scrutiny as long as you follow a few sensible precautions. So what are those precautions? Well, first of all, and most importantly, you're going to have to go back in the closet. This means no kissing your partner in public or making any other displays of affection. You'll also need to leave your rainbow swatch at home. These were actually banned from the country last year, and the simple act of wearing a rainbow swatch in public carries a potential sentence of 3 years in jail. Yikes. Number 2, don't use any gay dating apps while you're in Malaysia. Remember that sting operation in 2019? Yeah, police officers in Malaysia are actively using these apps to try and entrap people. Your best bet is to stay off them altogether, or you might even want to completely uninstall them before you arrive. Number 3, stick to the big cities. Kuala Lumpur is surprisingly modern and progressive. It's sort of the Austin, Texas of Malaysia. There are lots and lots of international tourists, and along with that, an immense amount of cultural tolerance. There are even LGBT rights groups in Kuala Lumpur, as well as some unofficial gay bars. Number 4, stay in a nice hotel. We stayed at 2 different properties in KL, the Sheraton and the Sama-Sama Suites by the airport. We were treated better at these than any hotel in the US, and there were no questions asked at either property when we opted to share a room with a single king-sized bed. I personally would avoid smaller accommodations like an Airbnb. I just think it's possible that the host might be spying on you, or they might be quick to call the police if they find you somehow suspicious. This isn't going to happen at any of the larger hotels. But if you follow all this advice, if you stay at a nice hotel, if you stick to big cities, if you uninstall the dating apps, and if you don't call any attention to yourself, I think you're going to be just fine. The real question is it worth it? Is it worth going back in the closet just to visit Kuala Lumpur? Well, for me, the answer is a resounding yes. I absolutely loved this city. I loved the people, I loved the food, and we got to see some really cool stuff. Let's start with the Petronas Towers. This is probably the most recognizable landmark in the city. You might know them from the movie Entrapment, where these played the role of the fictional International Clearance Bank.
I give you the world's tallest building and home of the International Clearance Bank. Do I have your attention now?
Undivided.
In actuality, the towers are open to the public, and for a small fee you can visit both the sky bridge and the observation deck. This has some fantastic views of the city, although it might be outdone by the nearby KL Tower. The KL Tower is less iconic, but it's both cheaper to visit, and I'd argue that the views here are even better, although it might just be that the weather cooperated a bit more during our visit. We're also huge fans of visiting the aquarium in every city we go to, and the one in KL is pretty great. It's not the biggest I've ever seen, but I love their motorized walkways to let you explore the exhibits without pushing your way through crowds of people. They did a similar thing at Ripley's in Toronto, and for the life of me, I don't get why more aquariums and museums don't do this. It just makes such good sense. Chinatown is well worth a visit. This is where you're going to find your typical lineup of food vendors and counterfeit goods for sale. But Chinatown is also where they have some incredible Hindu temples. For something you're not going to see anywhere, how about Stonehenge? Okay, no, that's not actually Stonehenge. But let's talk about the park where it's located, because this was probably our favorite part of Kuala Lumpur. The Perdana Botanical Gardens are home to a number of massive nature exhibits, including the Butterfly Park. This entire space is fully netted in, and it's full of butterflies. This was loads of fun. In a similar vein, there's the nearby Aviary. Much like the Butterfly Park, this is a huge netted area, but full of birds that walk right up to you.
Pretty nuts. You can just kind of walk right up to the birds.
Bordering the park is the National Museum of Malaysia. This has some great information about the history of the country and of Kuala Lumpur. And you absolutely have to see the National Mosque. This is stunningly beautiful. One small note when planning your visit, they do have a dress code here. Women will have to cover their hair and men are going to have to wear long pants. You'll also need to leave your shoes on the rack outside because they don't allow shoes in. The National Mosque is one of the best examples of Islamic architecture in Kuala Lumpur, and there are quite a few to pick from. Personally, I love Kuala Lumpur. I am so happy that we kept our original itinerary, and not just so that we could take that awesome flight with Singapore Airlines, although that was pretty incredible. Now, I do have to admit that I still have some conflict about spending my tourism dollars in countries with anti-gay laws. We backed out of a trip to Jamaica a few years ago for similar reasons. They also have anti-gay laws, and we didn't want our money supporting that. But I think my point of view has actually evolved over time. I think that by showing up as a gay tourist, you're helping to demonstrate that gay people exist and that we're nothing to be feared. I think that actually probably helps quite a bit. What I don't think is helpful is showing up and stirring up controversy like the 1975 did. I think Malaysian activists, LGBT activists, are going to tell you the same thing, that this is actually doing more harm to their cause rather than helping it. My advice would be to check the Jesus complex at the door and try to be tolerant of the culture, even if you don't agree with it. But what are your thoughts? I would love to hear from you. Is it worth it to go in the closet to visit Kuala Lumpur? If you enjoyed this video, please also give it a like and subscribe. You have no idea how happy I get every time I get a new subscriber, so please do hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn something completely new, why not check out this video over here? It's about Panama. It's all about history. It doesn't really have anything to do with Malaysia or gay stuff, but hey, you might learn something new, you might enjoy it. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.